Well, this idea of the brain as a computing device, among other things, has dominated your thoughts for a few decades now, right?
Oh, since way back.
Since way back, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was in graduate school at Yale, a very behaviorist school, in Neil Miller's lab. He was Hull's most prominent student. But I had, as I said, I'd already become a heretic as an undergraduate, so I wasn't buying it, nor was I buying it when I took the advanced course in learning from Alan Wagner. Meanwhile, I was building special purpose computers to run the experiments I was running, and I was reading the theory of computation and books on how computers worked and so on. And Chomsky was coming along. I went to a talk. This guy I'd barely heard of, Noam Chomsky, he came to speak at Yale. And I'd just been reading the stuff that Skinner and Osgood had written on language. I didn't know anything about language, but I thought, this is rubbish. And so I went to hear this talk by Chomsky, and I was an instant convert. I thought, okay, this isn't rubbish. So I embraced the computational theory of mind. And I've thought since those days, I mean, many of these days, most neuroscientists pay lip service at least to it, right? But many of them would immediately add, yes, the brain computes, but it doesn't compute the way a computer computes.
Yeah, this is the story.
And having studied how computers compute, and I've programmed all the way down to the machine level, right? So I know what goes on under the hood and so on. And I've always thought, well, wait a second, there isn't any other way to compute. I mean, tell me how it is you compute, but not the way computers compute, right? I thought Turing settled that.
Mm. Well, so I had a brain-inspired listener question about Chomsky's influence on you. So, you remember going to a talk and having that sort of solidify your approach?
Oh, yeah. I remember being very impressed. And then I read it didn't come out till later, but when it came out, I read his reflections on language. But also at Penn was cognitive science was very much a happening thing at Penn, and I had colleagues like Lila Gleitman and Henry Gleitman and Duncan Luce. So I was strongly influenced by them. And Dick Neisser was on sabbatical there the second year I was an assistant professor. So I was influenced by all of those people, and all of those people were influenced by Chomsky. I mean, Chomsky sort of ran through the way we all thought. There's a kind of interesting story about that. Some years later, after I'd been publishing a bunch of stuff, and this is quite a number of years later, Noam, whom I'd met once or twice, and who I've often corresponded with subsequently, but he wrote me a very polite letter. It's a letter, I think. This was before email. Gently complaining that I was channeling him without ever citing him.
Okay.
And I was very embarrassed. And I thought, he's absolutely right. So I wrote back apologizing and saying, look, you're so much a part of the intellectual milieu in which I swim. I just didn't occur to me to acknowledge or even recognize my intellectual debts. Anyway.